Hi, everybody. Hi, good morning. It's Friday. It's Good Friday. So, hopefully, many of you have got family around today for the weekend. Fantastic. I just wanted to pop on today and talk to you just very briefly a little bit more about my book. There it is. And I want to just talk a little bit today about why on earth I wrote a book about medical birth. And I think it's confusing sometimes in the birth world because we have this movement around natural birth that's happened in the last sort of 30 or 40 years. And people like Janet Velasquez and the active birth movement, and also Marie Mongan and the hypnobirthing movement has really changed the way that we think about birth in the last kind of couple of hundred years, since it's become a very medicalized thing. And I think that's a wonderful, wonderful thing. And the thing is, we've gone so far towards the idea that a natural birth is the be-all and end-all of birth that we've lost sight a little bit of the benefits that we have of modern technology and modern medicine. And that's one of the things that I really love about active birth, is the fact that, yes, it is about trying to facilitate as natural a birth as possible by using your body position, by being spontaneous, by having privacy and encouraging birth hormones and all of that. But what I really love about it is the fact that it also says, let's embrace whatever tools we have to give us the best birth possible and to have the most positive experience possible. And that, for me, is absolutely the key thing. Hi, Verity, just seen you've joined us. So what I really, really feel strongly about is positive birth and not necessarily a natural birth. And of course, I would love for everybody to have a natural birth and, to have a wonderful experience. But the reality is, it is not called labour for nothing, and that it actually can be quite difficult. Contractions can be very painful, and you can also be in labour for quite a long time, which means that you get quite tired and all kinds of things can happen which take you out of that perfect ideal environment for facilitating a natural birth. And I think one of the things that makes me feel very strongly about that is my own experiences. And so I just want to talk about that just briefly, because I can talk about it for hours. With my first baby, I was pregnant in 2009. And I went to NCT classes, and I had the idea I wanted to do hypnobirthing because it's, really big these days. So I did a hypnobirthing course, and I did enjoy it, and I thought it seemed very useful. But I think alarm bells probably should have rung with me when we were doing like all the self-hypnosis exercises, and you were supposed to imagine your hand raising up in the air, and I'm kind of like looking around the room like, oh, yeah, better put my hand in the air. Obviously, I don't think it was really kind of working for me. And then when actually I went into labour, my labour happened it was quite full on quite quickly from when the first contraction started early on a Saturday morning. And I laboured all day, and I, had a fantasy about baking bread, and I went to Co-op and had a contraction in the cheese aisle. And in fact, I did my hypnobirthing exercises, and I listened to my CD, my affirmations and everything, and it was all kind of going fine. And then after, a whole day of contractions, and it was full on, and, I tried to watch movies and I couldn't concentrate. And by about 1 a.m. on Saturday night, we were like, come on, this is really heating up. We think the contractions are like 3 minutes apart, it's going to happen. Called the midwife, she came round, and I was planning a home birth. And I said, whatever you do, don't tell me I'm only 1 centimetre dilated. And she basically said, you're 1 centimetre dilated. And so I'd been labouring all day, and basically had no progress whatsoever. And so I was kind of really devastated emotionally, but also I was really tired by that point, and I didn't have many kind of practical things to do. Anyway, fast forward a couple of days, and I managed to get through another 2 days of labour at home without anything at all except a TENS machine, which is incredible to me now. And then by the 4th day, I was utterly, utterly broken, as you can imagine. And to cut a long story short, I did end up transferring into hospital and having a huge number of interventions over the course of a day, including starting on gas and air, which basically went in my mouth and didn't come out for the next 12 hours. I had my waters broken. I had an oxytocin drip to try to increase the contractions. I ended up having an epidural. Although, to be perfectly honest, at the time, I was completely out of it. I was hallucinating from the gas and air, and I had this sort of form waved in front of me for the epidural consent form. I couldn't read. I could barely talk. I was having hallucinations, and I was out of my head, really, and I was exhausted and in pain, and I was in no position to have a clue what an epidural was, what the side effects were. I hadn't done any research at all, and I basically found that one nugget of me inside of me, I had no idea if I could even sign it. I mean, I don't remember even signing it. And I remember turning to my husband and trying to look at him with the most penetrating stare that I could and really focus and just say to him, I can't make this decision. I can't sign this form. You have to do this for me because I cannot do this. I am in no position to make this consent. I am not in a position of consent. And honestly, I can't remember. I'll have to ask him later whether I signed it or not. But anyway, I had the epidural, and it was quite difficult. It didn't go right to start off with, and they had to do it again. Hi, Julie. Joining our discussion about my difficult first birth. And anyway, I did have the epidural, and it allowed me to get a much needed rest. And, you know, it was an incredible relief because it was day 4 of my labour by this time. And then by the evening, things still weren't really progressing. So in the end, the epidural was topped up to here, and I was taken into theatre in case I needed a cesarean. And Gaius eventually was born, although he needed the help of forceps, so that included an episiotomy. And he needed to be resuscitated at birth, although he was fine very, very quickly. And so he was born 85 hours later after a lot of interventions. And, you know, there's a photograph of me just after he was born with him on my lap or something. And I've got my arms out here with all the drips and everything on it. I'm actually boss-eyed like that because I'm so out of it completely. And I felt very traumatized by that whole experience. And later on, so this is a very long-winded way of saying why I wrote my book. Sorry about that. But I feel it's important to share my experience. And so fast forward a couple of years, I found it very difficult to look back on my birth experience with Gaius. And then when I was pregnant the second time round, I knew I had to do something different. And I actually was lucky enough to be able to do a bit of psychotherapy. I got it free through my husband's health insurance. And I did 6 weeks with a psychotherapist. And we explored what it was that I found traumatic. And what was really interesting was that it wasn't actually what I thought was the traumatic thing, because we dug into it, and it turned out that actually the thing that really I felt the most trauma about was feeling disconnected from my baby when he was born. And I'd had this epidural, I couldn't feel anything. By this point, I was totally out of it, although they'd taken away the gas and air by this point. So I was a bit more compos mentis, but I'd been awake for 4 days and hadn't had anything to eat or anything. So I was kind of like, oh, really woozy. And they basically handed me this baby. I didn't see him being born. I didn't feel him being born. And I was like, this could be any baby. And I knew it was my baby, and my husband was there, he'd seen him and everything else. It was clear it was my baby, but I didn't feel connected to him in any way. And actually, the kind of bonding kicked in quite quickly, and I didn't have any problems after that with breastfeeding or anything like that. So I was really, really lucky that the postnatal period was fine. But actually, the trauma was not the whole thing. It was actually making the decision to do something that completely took my control away 100%. 100%. And I realized that when I had my second baby, when I was pregnant the second time around, I knew that I had to avoid an epidural at all costs. And everything in my planning the second time round was to avoid the epidural, to make sure I felt connected to my baby. And so that was when I started doing research. And actually, that's when I came across Active Birth, which was really amazing, because it not only gives you really, really practical ways of dealing with labour. And now now I know that had I done Active Birth the first time around, I probably would have been able to have my baby a bit quicker the first time round, because I would have been in more useful positions to facilitate a good labour and birth. But I would have had coping mechanisms as well, because the first time around I just didn't know what to do with myself for days and days and days. So I really did loads of research, and I researched induction, because I'd been told that because my baby was big before and he'd had shoulder dystocia, that it made it more likely that would happen with the second one as well. So they were going to induce me at 40 weeks and this, that and the other. And then of course that means you're more likely to kind of want to need pain relief, because inductions can be more intensive. So I was researching epidurals and making sure I knew exactly what that meant. And by the time I went into labour with my second baby, I was a fierce and determined lady. And I thought I had been the first time round, but you know what? It's only after I had done a huge amount of research, and I went into the hospital because I wasn't allowed to try to have a home birth a second time, and due to the risk of shoulder dystocia. So I agreed to have an induction, and she was really late, which was really annoying. Because I really wanted to avoid an induction, but I'd agreed, but I was armed with the knowledge of exactly what an induction involves, which is a lot more complicated than just turning up and having an injection. It's a long process that's got many, many stages, some of which are optional, and that you can change your mind and say, okay, I don't want any more. But after a certain point, you're absolutely committed to the induction. And I understand all the stages. I understood what I was prepared for and how I could ask for things to be minimised, for the dose to be minimised, all that kind of stuff. And I went in there and I was like, I am going to have the most fucking awesome birth, and I will let you do this to me. All right, I'll let you do this. All right, I will let you break my waters. All right, I'll let you examine me. And they were really pushy, trying to get me to do induction. I was like, no, I'm in labour now. You're trying to make me put an injection in. I'm in labour. Thanks. I've come in. I've agreed to your recommendations. Now you can just back off. And do you know what? I had an amazing birth the second time around. But the only way I managed to do that was to be really well prepared in terms of having practical things to do, which the Active Birth gave me, and loads of information at my fingertips, knowing exactly all the options that were available to me, exactly what they were, exactly what they meant, what the implications were, and whether or not that was a hard boundary for me, and whether or not I was prepared to do that or not. And it was only then I was able to fight my corner and be 100% certain that every decision that I was making was based on knowledge that I had. And I wouldn't have been able to do that with the information that was provided to me by my midwife. Hospitals do give you little leaflets about induction that's just like, less than 500 words about it. I'm sorry, but in my book, actually, I haven't counted the pages, but probably about 70 to 100 pages are just about induction. There's a lot of information in there, and if you have all that information, if you know all of those implications, if you know all the drugs, and you're like, yeah, actually I'm finding it a bit of a struggle to cope with, I want a bit of pethidine, you know what, I'm done, I'm really tired, I'm going to have the epidural. But then knowing that all the things that it implies, and knowing that, for example, with an epidural, you know, you end up lying on your back, which is not a very good position to facilitate labour, so that you make sure that you lie on your side, that you've got your leg up over a ball maybe, or your husband's holding it up, opening the pelvis, making sure people turn you over every 20 minutes or so to make sure you're moving around, making sure you're a little bit upright, facilitating your body to still kind of work as best you can, you know, means that you can really make the best of that situation. And actually, my second birth, I had my waters broken to start labour off, and I had gas and air, which was amazing, and I couldn't have done it without that, and I put it off as much as I could, and it was amazing. And there was a bit of tension around my birth. It was very fast, and actually Beatrix, my second baby, did have shoulder dystocia as well. So at the last minute, that means basically the head is born, but the shoulders don't turn around properly and get a bit stuck. So the baby can get stuck, which can be very dangerous for both the mother and the baby very quickly. And that was dealt with very quickly, and she popped out. But at no point in my labour did I feel scared. Did I feel like things were out of my control? Did I feel that somebody else was making the decision for me? I felt completely connected with my body. And while my husband said afterwards, oh, I felt really scared that, you know, it was really full on and you were roaring, blah, blah. And I was like, at no point did I feel that. I knew all the way through I was nailing it. And I was taking and making a choice for every bit of pain relief and every bit of intervention. I made a personal choice